Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Roseanne Berger. I am the director of the Mini Medical School, and I want to welcome you to what I know is going to be a very interesting evening. You know, there's been a groundswell of interest in health and nutrition. And when I was in medical school, there was very little, if anything, taught about that subject, other than what I might read in some magazine myself. So I am delighted that this evening we have three experts who are expert in nutrition research, and bringing cooking and healthy eating to the community, which are all very important. We're going to be devoting this entire semester of the Mini Medical School to subjects that are related to nutrition. Following this introduction this evening, on October 16th, you will all be invited to participate in a symposium on October 16th called Food is Medicine. And it was organized by the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. It will be a full day that will look at nutrition and health. And I think it should be very exciting. We'll also be having speakers addressing nutrition and cancer and nutrition in the area of diabetes and obesity. So we are demonstrating that this is important from both a scientific point of view and certainly in a healthcare point of view. So let me introduce our three speakers. They are really a rock star panel. The first is Dr. Gary Giavino. He's an emeritus professor of community health and health behavior and a former associate dean for faculty affairs in the School of Public Health and Health Professions. And he's internationally recognized for his work in tobacco use and nicotine. He facilitated development of the global tobacco surveillance system in partnership with the CDC and the World Health Organization. And he led a major study that represented 3 billion people who resided in about 16 countries. But we're not having him here tonight because of that expertise. That will be for another session. Tonight, he is invited to join us because of his other interests in lifestyle factors, including exercise and nutrition, and the recommendation of our UB medical students who raved about his presentation on nutrition to them. Dr. Giavino joined the UB faculty in 2006 after earning a bachelor's degree at Notre Dame and a master's and PhD at UB. And in 2019, he was named a State University of New York Distinguished Professor, the highest faculty rank and recognition in the entire SUNY system. Our next speaker will be Dr. Jessica Kruger. Dr. Kruger is a clinical assistant professor also in community health and health behavior. And she is the interim coordinator for teaching innovation and excellence. She is a health educator whose research focuses on consumption and addictive behaviors, health behavior decision-making, and teaching in public health. She collaborates with the Lighthouse Free Clinic and the Seneca Babcock Community Center. And that's particularly important because in those efforts, she is working with students and the community and in interprofessional teams, which really is the future of healthcare education. Dr. Kruger joined UB after getting a bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Michigan and her doctorate from the University of Toledo. And then she will be followed by Nicole Clem, who is a registered dietitian, a nutritionist, and a program director of the Dietetic Internship Program. She teaches nutrition to the dietetic students, and also, again, a interprofessional group of learners, including medical students. She teaches dietary assessment. She runs an internship. She does community nutrition, And she's done a very creative effort in culinary medicine and has actually taught people to cook using online pedagogy and having people actually teach cook along with her in their own kitchens. Very exciting stuff. She is founding member of the Slow Food chapter in Western New York. She might be able to explain what that is. And she was awarded also an outstanding dietetics educator for the Eastern region on behalf of Nutrition and Dietetics Educator Practice Group in 2016. She joined UB in 2018 after being a educator for 7 years. She earned her undergraduate degree at Hobart and William Smith and a master's in nutrition and dietetics from Duville. She is also joined this evening by one of her students, Jasmine Hardaway. So we'll get some firsthand testimony about the work that Dr. Cohn does. So this is truly an interprofessional presentation, and I'm very excited to now turn the Zoom field over to Dr. Giovino.
Okay, I'm assuming you can see the slides and can hear me. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, first I just want to declare that I have nothing to disclose that would put me in conflict, and also nothing I should say should be taken as medical advice. For that, see your physician or physicians or dietitian. I want to introduce myself a little bit, talk about consequences and patterns of nutrition in the United States, influencing factors, and then what you might do individually and environmentally. So thank you, Roseanne, for that, Dr. Berger, for that wonderful introduction. And yeah, most of my life career has been spent on tobacco, but I've had a burning interest in nutrition ever since fall of 1976 in Cancer Epidemiology 501, when I learned that high meat consumption and low fiber content seemed to be related to colon cancer. And I couldn't believe it because I thought I ate the best diet in the world. And since then, I've been studying it. I've been off cigarettes for 40 years, and I changed my diet about 20 years ago, more in the direction of a plant-based diet. And the process, have enjoyed seeing the literature develop, some of which I'll share with you this evening. In terms of consequences, this is a summary of what I assume most of you are aware of, that poor nutrition, suboptimal nutrition, can influence overweight and obesity. There are certainly concerns about malnutrition around the world, and even, you know, in rural areas and inner city of Buffalo, there are people who have caloric insufficiency. And then there are deficiencies in vitamin A, iron, and iodine, which are concerning, especially internationally. Of course, coronary heart disease and other cardiovascular diseases, high blood pressure, poor lipids, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, oral diseases, constipation, diverticular disease, and other Western diseases, and some cancers. Before I have 15, 20 minutes, and there's no way I can get into all the details. And I want to refer you to one of my go-to places, which is the Nutrition Source website at Harvard. I mean, if you're not going to get a master's or take courses at UB, this is a good alternative. And, Harvard has done tremendous work in the area for decades. And this website is incredibly informative. For example, I just picked out, they point out that there are some high quality foods and low quality foods. There really are some foods that are better than others in terms of health effects. And also there isn't one perfect diet for everyone, owing to biochemical individuality and lifestyle. You can even, since these slides are going to be shared, click on the link I provided and get their free digest on healthy eating and living. Now, I'm in tobacco, and up until 10, 15 years ago, we used to say that cigarette smoking is the leading preventable cause of death and illness in the United States. And at least and CDC put out those numbers in about the last 10 or 15 years. The global group at the University of Washington under Chris Murray, funded by the Gates Foundation, has done really intense look at attributable risks, and actually is now estimating that dietary risks are cause more deaths in America every year than even tobacco use. And if you look at their third, fourth, and fifth conditions that contribute to death, these aren't exclusive, but they're diet related: high blood pressure, body mass index, and plasma glucose, and total cholesterol. And the diseases include some cancers, mostly cardiovascular diseases, diabetes especially, are the ones that food contributes. The relative risks aren't as high as tobacco, but everybody eats. So when we look at risks for disease, we can look at animal studies and studies with all sorts of organisms, and then we can look at observational studies in people, and we can look at experiments or trials in people. And I'm going to present to you some interesting data on observational studies that I think will whet your appetite. And this first study is a study from the Harvard group, an observational study that looked at 73,000 women from the Nurses Health Study, the first one, 92,000 women from the second one, and about 43,000 men from their health professional study. And they looked at their risks of developing coronary heart disease based on the kinds of food they ate. And they developed dietary indices based on how many plant foods they ate and how many animal foods they ate. And then they also developed a healthy plant-based dietary index and an unhealthy plant-based dietary index, because there are healthy plant-based foods such as whole grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts and legumes, oils, teas, and coffee received positive scores in the healthy index, whereas less healthy plant foods like juices and sweetened beverages, refined grain, potatoes and fries, and sweets received negative scores. They followed people for over 4.8 million person years of follow-up, 8,000 incident coronary heart disease cases, and they found that higher adherence to a plant-based diet index was independently after controlling for potential confounders. It's the blue line here. The plant-based dietary index over time, the stronger it was, the lower the risk for coronary heart disease. But the healthy plant-based dietary index was even more protective, and the unhealthy plant-based dietary index increased the risk. A lot of people, when they think of risk for heart disease, of course, they think of saturated fat and cholesterol. But this points out that unhealthy plant foods can be just as dangerous. In fact, the next slide looks at unhealthy plant foods, and their risk is actually slightly higher than animal foods, with healthy plant foods decreasing risk the more you eat them. Another study I'd like to share with you is a study from the same group that looked at the health professionals follow-up study. And they looked at healthy lifestyle factors. So not just diet, but moderate to vigorous physical activity, not smoking, moderate alcohol consumption, and not being obese or overweight or obese. And it's a fascinating study. They looked at the risks among medication users. People were taking medications for